warbles on a lot here. Those of you who've been paying attention to my channel will know that a week ago, when it was still pretty red hot news, if you'll pardon the pun, I put up a video about London's Grenfell towering Inferno disaster, paying particular attention to the aluminium compound panelling which clad the building. And as I said in the video, 4 years ago in Melbourne, there was a fairly tall apartment building that was clad in aluminium compound panelling, and it caught fire, and they were able to extinguish the fire, but it turned out that it was clad with non-compliant panelling which lacked the flame retardant in the compound polymer filling material which goes between the two thin layers of aluminium on this decorative panelling stuff. And I learnt today from an Al Jazeera news item that not only was I right saying that there were 171 buildings that were checked 4 years ago in Melbourne, and 51% of them had the non-compliant flammable cladding on them, but the building that caught fire 4 years ago, despite a court order requiring that it be reclad with appropriate material, it still is covered with the incendiary cladding. And as the bloke from the Australian Fire Council said, if there was 51% of the buildings in Melbourne have got the wrong stuff in them, what's the ratio going to be like everywhere else in Australia, and what's the ratio going to be like everywhere else in the world? So, on the comment thread of this video, somebody called Clickbait Cop asked me to conduct an ignition test on some of this stuff, which it's an interesting idea. It won't tell us anything in particular because this stuff that I've got didn't come off Grenfell Tower. It came off the Glen Innes Commonwealth Bank front facade beside their automatic teller machine, which was being replaced by a bigger, newer automatic teller machine. Therefore, the facade needed to have different spacing to accept the new equipment. So this was getting pulled off. And bear in mind, this came off a bank. And people have been known in the past to apply accelerants to automatic teller machines which had failed to provide cash for them, and they've been known to set the things on fire in a fit of tantrumic rage and incendiary passion. So I'm pretty sure the bank would have specified that the facade aluminium compound panelling beside their ATM should be fire retardant. So perhaps if I try and burn this, all we're going to see is what the stuff on Grenfell Tower should have done. On the other hand, maybe there's been a substitution racket in this situation as well. So what I've done is I've got this long thin strip which should be fairly easy to hang on to. I've got in there with some tin snips, and I've cut one panel in half, and depending on how it goes, I may have a go at a solid rectangular panel, but you know, that sort of depends on how much smoke and shit and pollution comes off these ones. And the plan is to use fencing pliers to put them over the top of this stainless steel fire bucket, which routinely, regularly smelts beer cans into solid lumps of aluminium. So we know that the incinerator over there gets up to at least 11 or 1200 degrees Celsius. And having already gone and collected some firewood, I think really all that remains is to set the fire and light it, and then we shall see what we shall see. Okay, so it's 21 minutes past 12. And that should burn. All things being equal. So we'll let that catch on. And apparently that red coloured flame, that indicates 600 degrees. So we'll see how long it takes. Just a few minutes later, and we have a convection runaway. Still fairly smoky, as this fuel isn't perfectly dry. It's come off the forest floor. But it is combusting nicely. So therefore, I'll add fuel to the fire. And of course it was perfectly safe because I was wearing my Rural Fire Services safety hat. I wonder how this will go when I stick it in that flame. Okay, so midday, and we have a lot less smoke. We have a more even combustion going on. I think it's time we gave this a try. Oh yeah, the polyester is bubbling. The glue strip is alight. The whole thing's smoking. Yep. Well, that didn't take long, did it? The aluminium compound panelling is alight, and it is the central polyester filler which is burning, as well as the glue. Strangely, the vinyl sticker on the outside isn't burning. Well, it's not going to take a very long fire coming out a kitchen window if, say, somebody's got a pan full of hot oil and their chips overboil and the fire flows across the kitchen bench and out the window. There we go, we're now starting to drip. And the two layers of aluminium are separating. Yep, I can see why 5 minutes after you have this go off on your building, you're not going to have a very safe building. There you go. Clickbait cop. That is your combustion test on a bit of aluminium compound panelling. It burns all right. It burns and it comes apart and then it burns more. Dear oh dear oh dear. And if Melbourne is any indication, 51% of the high rises in Australia which have been clad with decorative aluminium compound panelling, they're going to go off like that. And they might even go off worse than that, because that was the stuff that was on the front of a bank, which you'd think would be the fireproof variety, if they've got any fireproof variety. And you will notice it resisted the fire for about 2.5 minutes. At 2.5 minutes, the edge caught alight. At probably 3.5 minutes, it started to separate and bubble and get going. And the first thing to catch alight was the glue, the adhesive. And that's still a really fuel-rich fire coming out of the burner can. I suppose, to prove the point, I'll put another bit in. "20 seconds. And the exposed polyester compound core is alight. "40 seconds. The adhesive is on fire. The central compound is squirting fire out both edges. I can see why the Camden Council evacuated 4 buildings full of people. I think it was 700 families, about 2,500 people, out of buildings that are covered in stuff like that. Especially in a city where the buildings go up 24 or 30 stories and the fire brigade only has ladders and hoses that can go up 10 stories. Well, there we go. The two halves of the aluminium are now separating, exposing much more compound polymer filling. To the air, and therefore making it available as fuel. And it is a very fuel-rich fire. You can see as soon as the preheated air enters the drum through those 600 injection holes, it immediately gets a chance to combust the polymer compound core. So, yeah, thanks for suggesting that, clickbait cop. I will now get on with doing the washing. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao. There you go. And now you know.